The cardiac wing was quiet when the monitors failed. The cardiac wing was quiet when the monitors failed. Not one alarm. All of them. Screens went black in the middle of a code blue. Ventilators fell to standby. Backup power hesitated instead of engaging. The other shrugged. In the chaos, a junior doctor shouted at the agency nurse to step back. "She's temporary," someone said. "She doesn't know this system." The patient's pulse thinned under failing machines. She moved once, adjusted one valve, redited one line, and told them, calmly, to seal the corridor. They thought she was overreacting. They were wrong. The agency badge printed in pale blue. Temporary. The word sat. The word sat beneath her name in smaller letters than the hospital logo. She clipped it to a scrub pocket without looking at it again. It was 6:42 when she stepped through the employee entrance of Northbridge Medical Center. The lobby lights were still dim. Night shift nurses moved slowly toward the lockers, shoulders lowered with fatigue. Day shift had not yet claimed the building. The cardiac wing sat on the 7th floor. High acuity, high ego. She read the board outside the nurse's station before anyone acknowledged her presence. Bed 701, post-op bypass, stable, 702. Arrhythmia monitoring. The other shrugged. 703, advanced heart failure. Awaiting transplant consult. 704, Federal Protective Detail listed in small administrative code. She did not pause at 704. She did not need to. The other shrugged. She had already noticed the two men in dark suits seated too comfortably in visitor chairs at the end of the hall. Not family. Not hospital security. Still, observing. The charge nurse approached her with a folder. The other shrugged. "You're the agency?" the charge nurse asked. "Yes." 3-week contract? "Yes." The other shrugged. "You'll take 701 and 703. She nodded. Charting system access was set up yesterday. Do not override attending orders. The other shrugged. "If there's a systems issue, call Biomed. Do not troubleshoot." "I understand," she said. The charge nurse handed her the tablet. There was no welcome, no orientation beyond the minimum. Temporary staff were expected to adjust. She stepped into 701 first. Post-op bypass patient. 68. Sedated lightly. Stable rhythm. The other shrugged. Ventilator assisting at minimal settings. She checked oxygen flow manually before reading the monitor. The line pressure was slightly lower than the displayed digital value. Not dangerous, just different. She adjusted the valve by a quarter turn. The numbers aligned. She documented nothing about it. In 703, the heart failure patient was awake. Mid-50s, pale. Watching the ceiling. "Morning," she said calmly. He turned his head slowly. "You knew?" he asked. "Yes." He studied her badge. "Agency." "Yes." He studied her badge. "Agency." "Yes." He looked away. The unspoken sentence was familiar. Temporary. She checked his IV site. Slight infiltration beginning. She replaced the line smoothly before it became visible swelling. He watched her hands. "You do that fast," he said. "It is better before it hurts," she replied. He nodded once. Trust builds quietly. At 7:10, the senior resident entered the wing with momentum. White coat crisp, coffee in one hand, tablet in the other. The other shrugged. He moved through the hallway as if the floor belonged to him. Rounds began at 7:20. When he reached 701, he spoke before reading the chart. "Agency nurse," he said without looking up. "Yes." "Output." "Yes." "Output." "Yes." "Output." Or port. She recited the numbers without checking the screen. He glanced at her then. "Testing. You adjusted oxygen." The monitor did not indicate variance. "It does now," she said. A pause. He checked. The numbers were aligned. He studied her for a moment longer than necessary. "Next time, call respiratory." The other shrugged. "If it remains unstable, I will." The charge nurse shifted slightly beside them. The resident moved on. The message had been delivered. Temporary staff do not adjust systems. Temporary staff report upward. In 703, the resident asked a question about medication timing. She answered again without reference. He nodded once, dismissively. As they exited the room, he spoke quietly to the charge nurse, but loud enough for her to hear. "Agency nurses sometimes overcorrect." She said nothing. There is no value in arguing on first shift. At 8:03, she walked the hallway once more without clipboard or tablet. She counted ceiling cameras. 3. Visible. The other shrugged. One dome housing with slight lens misalignment. She noted the blind angle near the medication room door. She noted the distance between crash cart and 704. Too far for immediate response. She moved it 12 inches closer. Not obvious. Just closer. The charge nurse noticed. Why move that? Clearer access, she replied. It was fine, then turned away. At 8:27. A brief flicker crossed the main monitoring panel at the nurse's station. Half a second. Then normal. One of the younger nurses glanced at it. Power grid's been strange this week, she said casually. The agency nurse looked up at the ceiling, listened. Backup generator hum was steady, but slightly delayed in tone. She did not comment. Instead, she opened the maintenance log section in the charting system. There were 3 entries in the last 5 days regarding minor electrical fluctuation. Signed off. Closed. She memorized the timestamps. At 9:12, the 2 men at the end of the hallway stood briefly. When a physician entered room 704, protective stance. Subtle, not theatrical. She passed them once, carrying medication trays. One of them looked at her badge. His gaze lingered half a second longer than casual. Assessment. She did not break stride. Inside 704, the patient was older than she expected, 70. Cardiac complications compounded by something not listed in open charts. He was awake, alert, studying her as if he had done this before. Agency? He asked quietly. Yes. He gave a faint smile. They underestimate agency. Sometimes, she replied. The other shrugged. His heart rhythm remained stable. But the telemetry cable was connected to a secondary port. Unusual. She traced the line. It routed through a separate monitoring relay before entering the main system. She memorized the configuration. The other shrugged. When she stepped back into the hallway, the senior resident intercepted her. You are not assigned to 704, he said. The other shrugged. I was covering medication. Do not alter anything in that room without instruction. I did not. His tone sharpened. That patient has federal oversight. I understand. He hesitated. The other shrugged. You understand? Yes. Something in her answer made him look at her again. Then he shook it off. Just follow. Protocol. Yes. It resumed normal function. She watched his hands. He did not notice her watching. When he left, she checked the pump again. Manually. The reset cleared surface lag. But the internal clock had shifted by 4 seconds. The other shrugged. Insignificant to most. Not insignificant to medication timing in cardiac titration. She recalibrated the schedule manually in the chart. The junior nurse beside her sighed. The other shrugged. You really check everything? Yes. That must be exhausting. The other shrugged. At 11:16, the first argument of the day occurred. In 703, the heart failure patient experienced mild chest pressure. Not severe, but present. The other shrugged. She ordered a repeat EKG immediately. The junior nurse hesitated. Sighed and said, Wait, unless pain is above 6. What is it now? She asked the patient. 4, he said. She nodded. 4 becomes 6, she said calmly. Prepare the machine. The resident entered mid-preparation. Why are we repeating? He demanded. New pressure, she replied. It is minor. The other shrugged. I am preventing delay. The EKG printed. There it was. Subtle ST depression. Not present earlier. The resident's jaw tightened. He ordered additional labs immediately. He did not apologize. He did not need to. But he did not challenge her again in that room. Authority shifts in millimeters at 12:30. Lunch rotations began. The hallway noise softened. The 2 men near 704 rotated positions with 2 others. Professional. Quiet. Not hospital security. The agency nurse charted steadily. Her documentation remained neutral. Precise. At 13:05, the main monitoring board flickered again. Longer this time. 3 seconds. Enough for silence to form at the nurse's station. Then it returned. The junior nurse laughed nervously. The other shrugged. Buildings haunted. The agency nurse stood slowly. Walked to the electrical closet at the end of the wing. Locked. Access restricted. She memorized the keypad brand. Older model. Easier to bypass than current generation. She returned to the station. The charge nurse approached her. You look concerned. I am observing. Observing. What? Pattern. The charge nurse crossed her arms. You think something is wrong? Yes. With what? System timing. Is wrong. Yes. With what? System timing. The charge nurse glanced at the monitors. All patients stable at 1422. The federal patient in 704 had a scheduled consult. During movement of portable imaging equipment, one of the protective agents stepped slightly into her path. Polite, authorized per. Authorized per. Sunnel only, he said. I am assigned to the wing, she replied. He scanned her badge again. Temporary. He nodded once but did not apologize. Inside the room, she checked the patient's oxygen again. The other shrugged. Line pressure steady. But the relay unit attached to his telemetry felt warmer than it should. She rested her fingers against it briefly. Heat. Not critical, but elevated. She looked at the agent. This unit was serviced recently, she asked. He frowned. Yesterday. By hospital staff, at 15:10, shift fatigue began to show in the staff. Paperwork piled. Voices rose slightly. The senior resident returned to 701 for reassessment. He stopped mid-sentence while reading the chart. You adjusted infusion rate, he asked. Yes. Why? Lag correction. There was no lag documented. There was, he looked at her. You are anticipating problems. Yes. Anticipating problems. Yes. That is not your role. She held his gaze calmly. Preventing them is, the other shrugged, because the patient's vitals remained steady, because no harm had occurred, because arguing against stability is difficult. At 16:02, a hospital-wide email alert pinged across terminals. Scheduled electrical maintenance tonight between 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock. She read it twice. Tonight. After shift change. Minimal staffing. The charge nurse shrugged. They send those every month. But her eyes shifted briefly towards 704. High-profile patient. Federal oversight. Electrical maintenance window. High-profile patient. Federal oversight. Electrical maintenance window. She opened the internal scheduling log. The maintenance ticket had been submitted only 6 hours earlier. Unusual for planned work. She closed the screen, said nothing. Not yet. At 16:45, she performed final afternoon checks. Rechecked oxygen pressure. Rechecked oxygen pressure. Rechecked backup battery indicators on. The other shrugged. Portable monitors. Everything appeared stable. Too stable. She returned the crash cart. 2 inches closer again. The junior nurse noticed. You really think something will happen? She met her eyes. The other shrugged. I think something could. I what? She did not answer. Because naming a threat gives it shape before proof. At 17:30, her shift approached end. The senior resident gathered the team for final review. Overall stable day, he said. Minor system delays. Nothing significant. He glanced at her briefly. As long as we do not overreact. The words were mild, but deliberate. She stood quietly at the edge of the group. Temporary badge catching fluorescent light. She did not defend herself. She did not agree, she listened. Because escalation rarely announces itself. She did not agree. She listened. Because escalation rarely announces itself loudly. It arrives in timing. In small delays. In maintenance windows scheduled at vulnerable hours. As staff dispersed, the federal protective detail remained. Rotations precise. Unsmiling. The other shrugged. One of the agents walked past her once more. You've been watching the monitors, he said quietly. Yes. Why? Because they flicker. He studied her. You reported it. Not yet. Gave structured handoff. Clear, concise, no speculation. Only data. The charge nurse accepted it. You'll be back tomorrow. She asked. Yes. Good. The word sounded reluctant, but honest. She unclipped the temporary badge as she stepped into the elevator. 7th floor descending slowly. In the reflection of the steel doors, she saw the day replay in fragments. Flicker. Lag. Heat. Maintenance window. Underestimation. The elevator opened to the lobby. Evening light filtered through glass. She walked past the reception desk without hurry. Outside, the air was still. She paused before reaching her car. Looked back once, at the building. 7 floors, 1 cardiac wing. Electrical maintenance scheduled at 2 o'clock. Minimal staffing. High-value patient. She did not call anyone. Not yet. Observation precedes action. She entered her car, closed the door gently. The engine started without hesitation. Tomorrow, she would return. Still temporary. Still underestimated. But watching. Because sometimes the first failure is only a rehearsal. She arrived earlier the next morning, 6:18. The sky was still grey. The hospital parking structure echoed hollow beneath her footsteps. She preferred arriving before the building fully woke. Systems are honest before people begin touching them. The employee entrance scanner hesitated half a second before turning green. Half a second is measurable. She stepped inside. The cardiac wing felt normal at first glance. Night shift nurses were finishing charting. The monitors glowed steadily. No alarms, no visible urgency. But the atmosphere carried something else. The other shrugged. Fatigue mixed with irritation. The charge nurse from the night shift looked up as she approached. "You're early," the nurse said. "Yes." "Good. We had another flicker around 2:40. Her voice carried annoyance more than concern. "Duration?" she asked. "Maybe 2 seconds." All screens reset, but came back online. "Any patient impact?" "None." Said it was external grid instability. She absorbed that without comment. External explanations are convenient. The other shrugged. She took report on 701 and 703 again. The federal patient in 704 remained stable. Protective detail unchanged. But there was a new face among them. Older. Sharper posture. Not hospital staff. She did not look at him twice. Inside 701, the bypass patient slept. Rhythm regular. She checked oxygen line pressure first. Stable. Then she crouched and inspected the wall outlet. Behind the ventilator. There faint scratch marks near the panel screws. Fresh. Subtle. She stood slowly. She stood slowly. She stood slowly. She's 703. The heart failure patient looked more alert than yesterday. The other shrugged. Yes. He watched her hands again as she checked his IV site. Something's different, he said quietly. What do you mean? The hallway. Feels tighter. She glanced toward the door. Security presence can change air pressure without anyone noticing. You are safe, she replied. He studied her face. You sound sure. The other shrugged. The senior resident moved faster today, as if determined to reclaim authority lost in small ways yesterday. When he reached 703, he spoke before she did. No further chest pain overnight, he announced. The patient nodded. The vitals? She gave them calmly. Any issues, he asked pointedly. Minor telemetry delay at 2:40, she said. He frowned. That was building-wide. Yes, she said nothing else. He moved on. At 7:28, the main monitoring board flickered again. Longer this time. 5 seconds. Long enough for 2 heartbeats to pass unrecorded. When the screens returned, all rhythms reappeared synchronized. Too synchronized. Digital systems do not reassemble perfectly after random glitches. The junior nurse laughed nervously. I hate that, she said. The agency nurse did not laugh. She walked to 704. The federal patient looked at her before she spoke. You felt it too, he said quietly. Yes. His eyes narrowed slightly. Pattern. Yes. The older agent standing near the window shifted his stance. You believe it is intentional? He asked. I believe it is repeated. That is not the same. No. She checked the telemetry relay again. Warmer than yesterday. Not hot, but increasing. She placed her hand flat against the casing. For 3 full seconds. Temperature matters in electronics. Heat means load. Load means activate. Heat means load. Load means activate. The other shrugged. Was this relay replaced recently? She asked again. The agent nodded. Yesterday afternoon. Has it been inspected since? No. What is the issue? He demanded. Relay temperature elevated, she replied. That does not indicate malfunction. No. It indicates use. Yeah, of course it is in use. It is connected. She did not argue. The other shrugged. Have Biomed inspect it, she said. He exhaled sharply. You are escalating speculation. I am requesting verification. He looked toward the agent, who did not interrupt. That hesitation changed the balance slightly. Fine, the resident said finally. I'll call Biomed. He walked away with irritation visible in his shoulders. The agent remained. You operate like you expect interference, he said quietly. I operate like timing matters, she replied. At 8:12, Biomed arrived again. Different technician this time. Younger. Less certain hands. He opened the relay housing under her observation. Into her observation. Seems fine, he muttered. Check internal log, she said. He hesitated. That's not standard unless there's failure. His expression shifted. There's been repeated handshake attempts from an external node, he said slowly. What node? The agent asked. Unknown ID, probably just software polling. She met the agent's eyes. Probably just software polling. The technician reset the relay. It powered down for 3 seconds. All monitors in 704 went black. 3 seconds. When they returned, rhythm resumed. Too clean, too precise. She watched the timestamp. The internal clock had jumped forward. 2 seconds. Small. But cumulative drift changes synchronization. Leave the how SYN open, she said quietly. The technician frowned. It's against protocol. Leave it open. The agent nodded once. The technician obeyed. At 9:30, the hospital IT department sent a quiet notice to administrative staff. Network latency under investigation. Not sent to clinical staff. She saw it because she checked the system logs manually. Latency. Handshakes. Relay heat. Electrical maintenance window tonight. She felt the pattern tightening. In 703, the heart failure patient dozed. She adjusted his pillow slightly. His oxygen line caught briefly on the bed rail. She freed it before tension formed. Small corrections prevent alarms. At 10:05, the senior resident confronted her at the nurse's station. You were making staff nervous, he said quietly. How? Implying sabotage. I have implying sabotage. I have implied nothing. You requested federal relay inspection. Yes. That suggests threat. The other shrugged. You are not permanent here. No. You do not understand the political sensitivity of 704. She met his eyes calmly. I understand sensitivity. He studied her expression. The other shrugged. For a brief moment, uncertainty crossed his face. Then ego returned. Stay within your lane, he said. She did not respond, because lanes collapse during system failure. At 11:22, the main monitoring board flickered again, this time during a medication titration. 703's heart rhythm spiked momentarily on screen. The junior nurse gasped. Is that real? She was already inside the room before the question finished. The patient's pulse was steady under her fingers. The spike had been digital, not physiological. She stepped back into the hallway. It is the system, she said calmly. The junior nurse's hands trembled slightly. What if it fails during something critical? She held her gaze. Then we do not rely on it. The words were simple, but heavy. Agent approached her privately. We ran the relay ID, he said quietly. And it pings to a contractor credential that should not have access to cardiac telemetry. She nodded once. So you believe there is interference? Yes, the other shrugged. Inside. Silence settled between them. Insider access changes threat geometry. The senior resident was informed minutes later. His face drained slightly. This is speculation, he said. It is data, she replied. The other shrugged. Administration was alerted discreetly. Meeting scheduled. But the maintenance window for 2 o'clock remained in place. She looked at the clock. 16 hours. At 14:05, another minor oxygen pressure dip occurred in 700. At 14:05, another minor oxygen pressure dip occurred in 701. Small, but synchronized with a brief system stutter. She corrected it manually again. The other shrugged. You anticipated that, he said. Yes. How? At 15:18, IT arrived physically on the floor. For the first time. 2 technicians. Serious. They accessed the electrical closet at the end of the hall. The older model keypad beeped reluctantly. Inside, one of the secondary monitoring routers had been connected to an auxiliary power splitter. Unauthorized, the technicians stared at it. That's not ours. One whispered. The agent stepped closer. Trace it. The technician swallowed. It's hardwired into the maintenance circuit. Maintenance. Tonight at 2 o'clock. The senior resident stood silent now. The other shrugged. His earlier confidence had thinned. She remained still, observing, because this was no longer a glitch. It was preparation. At 16:32, administration postponed the scheduled maintenance. Publicly, it was described as technical reassessment. Privately, it was described as technical reassessment. Privately, the word used was containment. The agent returned to her once more. You saw this before we did, he said quietly. I saw timing, she replied. He studied her face. Who are you? She met his gaze, without hesitation. Agency nurse. He did not smile. He did not believe that was the full answer, but he did not press further. At 17:50, as her shift ended again, the senior resident approached her. His tone was different now. Measured. You were correct to push inspection, he said. Yes, the other shrugged. I misjudged you. No. Why? Because the system was tested. And testing precedes execution. His jaw tightened slightly. You believe there will be a larger event? Yes, soon. He nodded slowly. The hierarchy had shifted again. Not publicly, but internally. At 1804, she gave handoff. Clear, structured, explicit instruction for manual verification of oxygen and telemetry if flicker recurred. The night nurse looked nervous. Do you think it will? She asked. Yes. The honesty did not comfort her. But it prepared her. She removed her badge in the elevator again. Temporary. Still, but the building no longer treated her as invisible. As she stepped outside, the sky was darker than the night before. Storm clouds forming in the distance. Electrical. Instability sometimes precedes natural storms. Sometimes it precedes something else. She paused again before reaching her car. Looked back at the 7th-floor windows. Behind one of them, a federal patient rested. Behind another, a relay housing sat open. Inside a closet, an another splitter waited disconnected. The system had been probed, measured, mapped. Tonight would not be maintenance. It would be escalation. She entered her car without hurry. Tomorrow, she would not just observe. Tomorrow, she would not just observe. Tomorrow, she would act. The call came at 1:58, not to her personal phone. To the hospital. Cardiac arrest. Room 703. Eddie awake. She had not slept deeply. Patterns have weight. They keep the body alert even when the lights are off. By 2:11, she was back in the cardiac wing. The maintenance window had officially been postponed. Unofficially. The building felt like it was waiting. The night staff looked relieved when she stepped off the elevator. You came back, the junior nurse whispered. Yes, because timing matters. Inside the room, the heart failure patient was pale, diaphoretic, gasping. Monitor showing ventricular tachycardia. Gasping. Monitor showing ventricular tachycardia. The resident on night call was already at bedside. Prepare for synchronized cardioversion, he ordered. The crash cart rolled in, defibrillator charging. Then, the monitors went black, not flicker, the copy. Every screen in the room died simultaneously. The ventilator display froze mid-breath. Then powered down. The hallway lights dimmed once. Twice. Emergency backup hesitated. A full second. Then another. Silence swallowed the room. The junior nurse inhaled sharply. What's happening? No alarms sounded. Because alarms require power, the resident swore under his breath. Manual bag now, he snapped. She was already moving. The ventilator tubing detached smoothly. She attached the manual resuscitation bag without fumbling. Seal, she said calmly. The junior nurse sealed the mask. She began controlled ventilation. Measured compressions of air. 1. The other shrugged. 3. The defibrillator screen remained dead. Battery. The resident demanded. It's not responding, the nurse said, voice shaking. The hallway erupted in distant noise. Shouted questions. But other shrugged. Metal doors clanging as security tried to isolate systems. The agency nurse did not look up. Check central oxygen pressure, she said quietly. The other shrugged. It's electronic. Manual gauge. She pointed toward the wall panel. The nurse scrambled. Pressure dropping. She would gauge. Whispered. How much? 3 points. How much? 3 points. Not catastrophic. Yet. The resident leaned close to the patient. We're losing rhythm, he said. The patient's pulse fluttered weakly under her fingers. Digital monitors were gone. Only touch mattered now. Prepare manual defibrillator backup, she said. The resident looked at her sharply. That's downstairs. Yes, the main crash cart depended on the same grid. She looked toward the door. Seal the corridor, she said. The junior nurse stared. What? Seal it. Why? Because this is not random. The words cut through the panic. The resident hesitated. Then he stepped into the hallway. Lock down the wing, he shouted. The other shrugged. Security responded this time without argument. Magnetic doors slid closed at both ends of the cardiac corridor. Inside 703, she continued manual ventilation. Slow. The other shrugged. Precise. The patient's chest rose under her rhythm. The older federal agent from 704 appeared at the doorway. What is happening? He demanded. System failure, she replied evenly. Localized. Not yet confirmed. He disappeared immediately to coordinate. The lights flickered again. Emergency backup engaged fully this time. Emergency backup engaged fully this time. The other shrugged. Dim red strips along the floor illuminated. Enough to see. Not enough to trust. The defibrillator sputtered back to life. Half power. Screen lagging. The resident swallowed. Charge to 100, he said. It responded sluggishly. The patient's pulse weakened further. She adjusted her grip, changed ventilation depth. Ready, the resident said. They shocked. The patient's body jolted once. Silence. Then, a faint rhythm returned. Weak, but present, the defibrillator screen flickered violently before stabilizing. Sinus tachycardia. The resident breathed. She kept bagging. Continue manual, she said. Ventilators rebooting. She did not release control. The other shrugged. Reboot cycles can fail mid-skeeth. At 2:19, power return. The other shrugged. D fully. Monitors lit up in sequence. Not perfectly synchronized. 2-second stagger between rooms. She noticed. The resident leaned back slightly. That was grid failure, he said. No, she replied. He looked at her. Then what? She glanced at the oxygen gauge again. Pressure still low. The oxygen drop preceded blackout. Pressure stared into the oxygen drop preceded blackout. His expression changed. He stepped into the hallway. Check 701. He ordered. The other shrugged. The junior nurse ran. Seconds later she returned. 701 pressure fluctuating 2. The older agent reappeared. We have reports of similar failures in ICU and step down. He said. Cardiac only, she asked. Yes. The pattern narrowed. She asked. Yes. The pattern narrowed. She finally allowed the ventilator to take over once more. But she did not step away. She kept one hand on the tubing. You expected this? Yes. How? Maintenance window was rehearsal. His jaw tightened. You think someone triggered it? Yes. The other shrugged. Faces pale. We had a coordinated override attempt. One technician said breathlessly. From where? The agent demanded. Internal node. Cardiac subnetwork. She stepped into the hallway. The relay in 704, she said. The technician froze. That unit is isolated. It was not yesterday. He ran towards 704. Inside 704. Inside 703, the patient stabilized gradually. Her hands remained steady. Controlled ventilation tapered as machine reliability improved. The resident looked at her differently now. Not irritated, focused. What do you need? He asked quietly. The other shrugged. Manual backup in every room, she said. And crash cart repositioned between 703 and 704. He nodded. He moved it himself this time. No argument. At 2:39, another flicker. Shorter. Localized to 704. The federal patient's monitors went black. For exactly 3 seconds. Then returned. Too precise. The other shrugged. The agent's voice carried down the hall. Secure that room. The other shrugged. The other shrugged. Additional federal personnel entered. Controlled. Weapons low but present. The staff stared. Fear spreading now. The junior nurse approached her. Is someone trying to kill him? The other shrugged. No. Then what? Confirm survival. The nurse swallowed. The distinction was chilling. At 2:51, IT confirmed something else. The blackout sequence had targeted not just telemetry, but timestamp synchronization. The other shrugged. If monitors lost sync long enough, recorded events would become unreliable. Cardiac events could be misinterpreted. Medication timing could drift. Chaos without visible attack. Subtle. Intelligent. She stood in the hallway absorbing it. This was not sabotage for spectacle. It was probing. Testing resilience. Mapping response speed. At 3:04, the hospital administrator arrived. Still half-dressed. What is happening? She demanded. Electrical anomaly, the resident began. It is not anomaly, she interrupted quietly. All eyes shifted to her. The other shrugged. The administrator looked irritated. And you are, agency nurse. The administrator's patience thinned. This is not the time for speculation. It is precisely the time, she replied calmly. Silence. The federal agent stepped forward. She has been correct twice, he said. The administrator paused. He said. The administrator paused. Explain. She kept her voice even. Sequence began with oxygen pressure dip. Then system blackout. then relay temperature spike. The target is telemetry integrity and response time. The other shrugged. And why? To assess survivability under disruption. The administrator stared. You are suggesting coordinated interference. Yes, the other shrugged. No one laughed this time. At 3:16, security reported unauthorized badge activity near the maintenance sublevel. The timing aligned exactly with the blackout. The administrator's face lost color. Shut down. All non-essential access, she ordered. The gent nodded. Containment deepened. In 703, the patient opened his eyes weakly. What happened? He whispered. She leaned close. Your heart misfired. She said calmly. We corrected it. He studied her face. Lights went out. Yes. Am I dying? No. He held her gaze. And believed her gaze. And believed her gaze. And believed her. At 3:32, systems stabilized fully. No further flickers. IT isolated the internal node feeding the cardiac subnetwork. The unauthorized splitter in the electrical closet had been removed. The relay in 704 was replaced entirely. The corridor remained sealed. Staff stood quietly at the nurse's station. Adrenaline fading. Fear settling. The resident approached her slowly. You told me to seal the corridor before we confirmed anything, he said. The other shrugged. Yes. Why? Because escalation follows test. He absorbed that. You were not guessing. No. He hesitated. What is your background? She met his eyes. Cardiac care. He almost smiled, but did not. At 3:48, the federal agent stepped toward her again. You identified objective correctly, he said quietly. Yes. And they were not trying to terminate. No, the other shrugged. You have done this before. She did not answer. Silence is sometimes confirmation. At 4:02, the administrator approached once more. Her tone had shifted. The other shrugged. Thank you for returning tonight, she said carefully. Yes, you may submit a written statement. I will document clinical observations. That is not what I meant. She met her eyes calmly. That is not what I meant. She met her eyes calmly. That is sufficient. The administrator nodded slowly. The power dynamic had changed, but undeniably, inside 703. The patient slept again. Stable. Alive. Because manual ventilation had bridged the blackout. Because manual ventilation had bridged the blackout. Because corridor containment had prevented interference during vulnerability. The other shrugged. Because someone temporary had acted as if permanence did. Not matter. At 4:25, the wing lights returned to normal brightness. Red emergency strips faded. Morning approached. The storm outside finally broke. Thunder rolled across the city. Natural electricity. Reclaiming the sky. Inside, systems hummed again. Too quietly. She stood near the nurse's station watching the monitors. They glowed evenly. Trustworthy for now. The resident stepped beside her. You were right, he said. She did not respond. You prevented collapse, he added. No, she said calmly. I prevented delay. The distinction mattered. The other shrugged. At 4:47, security escorted a maintenance contractor from the sublevel. No scene. No raised voices. Just quiet custody. The federal agent watched without expression. The administrator whispered to legal counsel. The other shrugged. The hospital would describe this as technical malfunction, but everyone on the cardiac wing knew otherwise. At 5:10, dawn began bleeding into the horizon again. She finally allowed herself to step away from 703. The junior nurse approached her. I thought we were losing him, she said softly. We did not. How did you stay so calm? She considered the question, because panic wastes oxygen. The nurse nodded slowly. She would remember that. At 5:30, she removed her gloves, washed her hands. Water steady. Warm. Normal. She looked at herself briefly in the reflective cabinet, temporary badge still clipped to her pocket. Underestimated. Challenged. But no longer dismissed. The wing was quiet again, but not the same. Systems had been tested. And answered. The first real strike had come. It had failed, which meant the next move would be more direct. She dried her hands, stepped back into the hallway, watching, because this was no longer about flickers. It was about confrontation. It was about confrontation. The other shrugged. The second attempt did not hide behind darkness. It came at 10:17 a.m. broad daylight. Shift change overlap. Maximum distraction. She was Rev. The other shrugged. D-Wing 703's labs when the alert appeared. Not on the central monitor. On her temporary badge. A vibration. Short. Precise. Not hospital issued. She did not react outwardly. She finished reviewing potassium levels. Normal. Closed the chart. Then stepped into the supply alcove. She removed the badge. Turned it over. A micro LED blinked once. Twice. Then projected a single word onto the inside of her palm. Oberserve. The projection vanished. She clipped the badge back in place. Returned to the hallway. Across the corridor, outside room 704, stood a man she had not seen before. Mid-40s, maintenance uniform. Neutral posture. Too neutral. His eyes met hers. No smile. No hostility. Assessment. She shifted her attention as if uninterested. Walked past him toward the nurse's station. The junior nurse looked up. Are you okay? Yes. Yes, in U_line. 703's telemetry is cleaner today. Yes. The maintenance worker entered 704 without knocking. Unauthorized. The Federal Guard at the door hesitated. Then allowed it. Interesting. She approached casually. Is maintenance scheduled? She asked casually. Is maintenance scheduled? She asked the guard. Routine check, he replied. I was informed it's cleared. She nodded once. Of course. Inside 704, the older agent lay propped up. Reading. The maintenance worker stood at the wall panel, not opening it. Just standing near it, his fingers brushed the relay housing lightly. Testing vibration. She entered without asking. Vitals check. She entered without asking. Vitals check, she said evenly. The worker glanced at her. Recognition flickered. So, she stepped to the bedside. Checked the agent's pulse manually. Normal. Everything stable? The patient asked quietly. For now, she replied. The maintenance worker finally spoke. The maintenance worker finally spoke. Electrical fluctuations last night, he said casually. Yes, she answered. Strange coincidence. Coincidences require ignorance, she replied. A far-in smile touched his mouth. He closed the wall panel. You're thorough, he said. I am employed to be. He stepped closer, lowered his voice slightly. The other shrugged. You sealed the corridor quickly. Yes, that's why. Because I dislike uncertainty. Their eyes locked. Not hostile, not friendly, professional. You are not hospital staff, he said softly. Correct. Then who are you? Temporary assignments end. Yes, but consequences do not. He exited. The Federal Guard looked unsettled. Was something wrong? He asked. No, she said. Then why did that feel wrong? She did not answer. The other shrugged. At 10:29, telemetry in 703 spiked briefly. Single irregular beat. Self-corrected. She checked manually. Pulse steady. The junior nurse frowned. Glitch. No. What then? Message. The maintenance worker was gone. So was the service cart he had arrived with. Security logs later would show no record of his entry. At 11:02, hospital administration convened an emergency meeting in conference room B. She was not invited. The federal agent was. So was IT. She continued her rounds. Normal tone, normal pace. In 701, a patient asked about discharge. In 705, medication asked about discharge. In 705, medication reconciliation needed review. The other shrugged. Routine stabilizes perception, but under it, she counted seconds, mapped blind spots, watched staff movement patterns. At 11:40, the older federal agent in 704 requested to see her. He spoke to you, the agent said. Yes. You recognized him. Yes. You recognized him. Yes. Ned back slowly. They sent someone to evaluate response. They sent someone to evaluate response. Yes, the other shrugged. A pause. You were not surprised. No. The other shrugged. You prevented the failure from succeeding. Yes. And now. Now, they adjust. At 12:15, cafeteria traffic increased. Visitors arrived. Noise level rose. Perfect cover. Her badge vibrated again. She stepped into an empty patient room. The projection appeared clearer. Meet roof. 12:22. No signature. No instructions. Just time. She did not hesitate. She informed the junior nurse she was checking ventilation flow rates, which was technically true. She took the stairwell, not elevator. Reached the roof at 12:21. Wind sharp. Clouds heavy again. The other shrugged. The city below unaware. He stood near the edge. Maintenance uniform replaced with plain dark jacket. No insignia, no badge. Yes. You weren't told to come alone. I assumed. He faced her now. No weapon visible. No overt threat. You adapted quickly, he said. Yes, we did not intend casualty. I know. We intended to measure. I know. We intended to measure. I know. And you interfered. Yes. Why? Because a patient required stability. That patient was not the objective. All patients are objective, of amusement. You think small. No, she said calmly. You do. Silence. Wind pressed against them. You were placed here recently, he said. Yes. By whom? Agency. Which one? Temporary staffing. He almost laughed. You are careful. Temporary staffing. He almost laughed. You are careful. Yes. He studied her face closely. Your response time is exceptional. The other shrugged. No. Intelligence. She said nothing. He smiled faintly. There it is. A helicopter passed in the distance. Noise shielding the moment. The other shrugged. You understand this will escalate, he said. Yes. And you will not always be able to seal corridors. No, because you chose cardiac. He held her gaze. Explain. You targeted vulnerability. That implies future attempt. And I prefer being present. A longer silence this time. The other shrugged. You believe you can counter systemic pressure alone? No. Then, I do not need to. You're not afraid, he observed. Fear alters timing. That's not what I asked. She met his eyes evenly. I am aware of risk. A small nod. Fair. He stepped back slightly from the edge. This hospital will undergo stress. Yes. You may not like the next phase. I rarely like instability. Yet you remain. Yes. He checked his watch. Then consider this professional courtesy. Next event will not target equipment. Wind carried the words away almost as soon as he said them. He moved toward the stairwell door. Paused. You should decide whether you are temporary. Then he was gone. She remained on the roof for several seconds longer. Processing. Equipment no longer primary vector. Human variable. She descended calmly. At 12:31, back on the wing. Everything looked ordinary. Too ordinary. The other shrugged. The junior nurse smiled nervously. You missed the administrator yelling at IT. Yes. Apparently security logs are corrupted again. She nodded once. Of course they were. In 703, the patient slept peacefully. Stable. In 704, the federal agent watched her enter. He warned you, he said. Yes. About what? Escalation. He exhaled slowly. So it begins. No, she corrected gently. It continues. The other shrugged. 1305, a code blue was called. Not in cardiac. In pediatric. In pediatrics. 4 floors down. She felt it before she heard it. Human target. She stepped into the hallway. The resident looked at her. You're thinking the same thing. Yes. They moved simultaneously. Stairwell again. No words exchanged. Because the pattern was no longer hidden, and the system had just shifted from machines to people. She did not tell anyone about the word. Not the resident. Not the federal agent. Not the federal agent. Not the federal agent. Some warnings lose value when diluted. At 1742, the first ambulance diversion request came through. The other shrugged. Weather-related accident on the interstate. Multiple trauma inbound. The emergency department requested cardiac backup. Capacity strained. Predictable. She moved through the corridor slowly, mapping faces, fatigue setting in. Shift change. Approaching. Vulnerability window widening. In 706, the elderly valve repair patient dozed. In 703, the night's cardiac arrest victim asked for water. In 704, the federal agent remained upright, despite medical advice. Watching. At 1803, the power did not flicker. The monitors did not fail. Nothing mechanical changed. Instead, a scream echoed from the stairwell. Not clinical. Not procedural. Raw. She was already moving before the resident processed the sound. The stairwell door on the east side slammed open. A young nurse stumbled out, blood on his scrubs. Not hers. Someone fell. No, pushed. I don't. She caught the nurse before she collapsed. Breathe, she said evenly. Who? Transport tech. He was carrying supplies and then... Footsteps thundered down the stairwell again. Security. Too late, they descended. Halfway down between floors 3 and 4 lay the transport technician. Unconscious, pulse present, skull laceration, supplies scattered across steps. No witnesses. No camera coverage inside stairwell. The other shrugged. Of course not. The resident knelt opposite. The other shrugged. Her. Accident? He asked. She examined the angle of impact, bruising pattern inconsistent with simple fall. Heel scuff marks near the top landing. Abrupt directional change. No, she said quietly. Controlled bleeding. Moved him carefully. As they lifted the stretcher, she noticed something near the railing, a folded square of adhesive tape, placed deliberately, at ankle height. Transparent, nearly invisible. Trip vector, not lethal. Destabilizing. Measurable. They transported him to imaging. Concussion likely. Recovery probable. But the message was clearer now. Equipment. Child staff. Escalation through proximity. At 1826, the hospital administrator ordered full internal lockdown. Visitors held in place. Staff movement restricted. Panic rising in murmurs rather than alarms. She returned to cardiac. The other shrugged. The federal agent was waiting near the nurse's station. It's begun, he said. It's begun, he said. Yes, this is psychological. Yes, not fatal. Not yet. His jaw tightened. You think they'll cross that line? Yes. Yeah, tightened. You think they'll cross that line? Yes. No. Unauthorized badges logged. She nodded. Because access is internal. He stared at her. You think someone on staff? Not willingly. His expression shifted. The other shrugged. Coercion. Possibly. At 1902, another disruption. This time subtler. Medication cart on the cardiac wing locked remotely. Electronic access unresponsive. Manual override jammed. 3 patients due for evening anticoagulants. Delay window measurable. The junior nurse looked close to tears. I can't open it. She stepped forward. Move. She examined the keypad. Not disabled. Looping. Signal interference. She removed the cart's battery panel. Disconnected the secondary circuit. Reset manually. The lock disengaged. Time lost. 2 minutes. 18 secondage. Her badge. Vibrate. The other shrugged. Almost instantly. 2:18. She did not look down. The resident saw her stillness. They are tracking us. Yes. How? Through reaction. At 1940, the transport technician regained consciousness. At 1940, the transport technician. At 1940, the transport technician. At 1940, the transport technician regained consciousness. Confused. No memory of the fall. Security found no one on stairwell footage entering or exiting during the window. Impossible. Which meant blind spots were intentional. At 20:05, the pediatric attending called. Another irregular oxygen reading. Different room. She closed her eyes briefly. They're cycling, she murmured. What? The resident asked. Departments. She moved again. The second pediatric room revealed no altered sensor this time. Instead, the wall oxygen outlet had been partially loosened. Flow reduced by 30%. Not enough to trigger immediate alarm. Enough to induce slow desaturation. Corrected quickly. Time recorded. Badge vibration. 3:07. They were increasing tolerance. Measuring whether fatigue altered response speed. Measuring whether fatigue altered response speed. At 20:44, cafeteria refrigeration failed. Food service delayed. Staff irritation rising. At 21:10, 2 elevators stalled between floors. No injuries. Just inconvenience. Every event small. Non-lethal. Accumulating strain. The administrator looked 10 years older by evening. This can't continue, she whispered during a corridor exchange. It won't, she said. You're certain? No. Honesty again. At 21:37, she finally felt it shift. Not through vibration. Through absence. No disruption for 12 minutes. Silence inside the storm. She stood near room 704. The federal agent watched her carefully. "You feel it too," he said. "Yes," the other shrugged. The junior nurse laughing too loudly. The resident snapping at a pharmacy call. Security walking faster. Strain peak approaching. "Emergency department," she said suddenly. They moved. Not running. Controlled. The other shrugged. The eddy was louder than usual. Trauma bay occupied. Para. The other shrugged. Medics cycling out. In bed 12, an elderly man complained of chest pain. In bed 7, a teenager with a fractured wrist. Normal chaos. But near the central desk stood a man arguing loudly. Civilian clothes. Angry. Demanding immediate treatment. Volume disproportionate to condition. Staff trying to calm him. Distraction node. She scanned the room. There, near the crash cart. A backpack, unattended, not staff issued, placed carefully against the lower wheel. The arguing man raised his voice again. Drawing eyes, she moved past him as if uninterested. Kneeled beside the crash cart. Unzipped the backpack halfway. Inside, not explosive. Not weapon. A portable signal jammer. Active. Low frequency. Targeting telemetry range. If activated fully, monitors in the ED would desynchronize simultaneously during peak volume. Multiple false codes. System overload. She powered it down quietly. Removed the battery. Closed the bag. Stood. Security finally subdued the arguing man. He did not resist arrest. As they escorted him out, his eyes met hers. Recognition. Professional courtesy again. The federal agent approached her. What was it? Escalation. He glanced at the backpack now in her hand. Fatal. No, not kill. Overwhelm. Force error through exhaustion. At 22:15, the disruptions stopped. Completely. No vibrations. No altered equipment. No locked carts. Silence. The hospital remained standing, frayed, angry, but functional. The resident leaned against the wall beside her. They didn't win, he said. No. Then why does this feel unfinished? Because it is. What happens tomorrow? They recalibrate. And us? We recover. The other shrugged. We're really here. She watched the controlled chaos of the ED settling. I was sent to observe. Observe what? She met his eyes evenly. Capacity. Realization dawned slowly. Not just ours, he said. No. The other shrugged. His voice lowered. The ears. Yes. He exhaled slowly. So this whole time, yes. He looked back toward the hallway where the arrested man had disappeared. Are we the test, he asked quietly, or are they? She did not answer. The other shrugged. Because tonight had proven something neither side had fully calculated. The hospital had not broken. And neither had she. Her badge remained silent, but that did not mean the evaluation was complete. It meant the next phase would require something more than disruption. It would require exposure, and exposure always carries risk. The other shrugged. For everyone. Night shift thinned the noise but not the tension. By 23:08, the emergency department had stabilized. The jammer was in federal custody. The other shrugged. The arguing civilian was no longer in the building. No public explanation was offered. Electrical interference, administration told staff. The phrase was becoming ritual. The other shrugged. She returned to cardiac without hurry. Fatigue had begun to show in small fractures. Missed pen clicks. Repeated chart entries. Shorter tempers. The other shrugged. The hospital was still functional, but strain lived just under the surface. That was the real metric, not survival. Sustainability. The other shrugged. In 703, the cardiac patient slept deeply. In 706, the valve repair patient required pain medication earlier than expected. Increased heart rate. Nothing dramatic. The other shrugged. Nothing accidental either. She adjusted the dose carefully. The resident joined her at the workstation. You were sent to observe capacity, he said quietly. The other shrugged. Yes. By who? She scanned the hallway before answering. People who needed to know if destabilization could be contained without external intervention. He absorbed that. So this wasn't random sabotage. The other shrugged. Oh. Then what is it? A feasibility study. For what? She looked at him evenly. The other shrugged. National infrastructure response. His expression hardened. They're modeling hospitals. Yes. For coordinated stress. Yes. He ran a hand over his face. And you? I report threshold. Silence settled between them. You're not here to stop them, he said finally. No. But you did. I preserved function. That's the same thing. No, she corrected softly. It only feels like it, different frequency. She stepped into an empty consult room. The badge display illuminated with text instead of light projection. Page complete. Dear Biari. No location, no time. Just directive. She stared at the message for a long moment. The door opened behind her. The federal agent stepped in. You got it too, he said. She did not look surprised. Yes. So this ends. This transitions. He closed the door. You were never just observing, were you? No. Then what were you measuring? Decision velocity. He studied her carefully. Yours? Yes. And P. I accelerated timeline. A long pause. You forced escalation sooner. Yes. Why? Because prolonged destabilization increases collateral risk. He nodded slowly. You shortened the experiment. Yes. Which means they'll adjust their model. Certain. At 0:12, the hospital quieted into that strange overnight stillness. Machines steady, lights dimmed, conversations hushed, but security presence doubled. Federal oversight now visible rather than subtle. The other shrugged. The administrator had stopped pretending this was internal malfunction. The narrative had shifted privately. Externally, it would remain controlled. At 0:47, she was called to IC. The other shrugged. You. Not for equipment failure. For a patient refusing treatment. Middle-aged woman. Post-stroke. Agitated. Paranoid. Insisting someone was testing her. The irony almost registered as humor. She entered calmly. The woman's eyes were wide, scanning every movement. They watching, the patient whispered. Yes, she said gently. The woman froze. The other shrugged. You believe me? Yes. Then why aren't you afraid? Because fear feeds the model. She did not say that aloud. Instead, she took the woman's hand. Monitoring isn't always harm, she said quietly. The woman's breathing slowed gradually. Sedation avoided. Crisis averted. When she stepped back into the hallway, she understood something critical. The stress events had not only targeted infrastructure. They had targeted perception. The other shrugged. If enough people believed collapse was imminent, behavior would accelerate it. Self-fulfilling destabilization. She found the resident leaning against the wall outside ICU. You handled that well, he said. She didn't need medication. She thought she was being tested. She was. He blinked. You mean by the stroke? Yes. She did not elaborate. At 1:30, she finally allowed herself to sit. 5 minutes. The other shrugged. No more. She reviewed the day mentally. Equipment manipulation, pediatric sensor, staff injury, signal jammer, escalation curve steep controlled, no fatalities, no irreversible harm, capacity maintained, model incomplete, because one variable had not behaved predictably. Her. The stairwell door opened quietly. He stepped in without knocking. No maintenance uniform, no jacket this time, plain dark shirt, neutral expression. You accelerated phase completion, he said. The other shrugged. Yes. That wasn't requested. No. Window. Yes. His eyes narrowed slightly. Why? Because your projection assumed passive observation. He tilted his head, and I don't observe passively. A small exhale through his nose. Almost approval. You changed the model. Yes. You made it adaptive. Your superiors will not appreciate deviation, he said. My superiors measure outcome. And what is the outcome? And under severe? We didn't test that. Not yet. The words were not threat. They were forecast. Will you? She asked. Not here, the other shrugged. A pause. This site yielded sufficient data. For what threshold? For phase 2. She held his gaze. Geographic scale. He did not confirm. Did not deny. The other shrugged. You were embedded to observe us, he said. Yes, then chose precision. Because if you expand destabilization nationally, counter-modeling must exist. His expression shifted. Recognition. You're building resistance architecture. Yes. He smiled faintly. So are we. They stood in quiet understanding. Two analysts on opposite sides of the same simulation. Will we meet again? He asked. Yes, then stepped backward toward the door. Professional courtesy, he said. Yes, at 2:10. The hospital remained intact. Staff exhausted but operational. No further disruptions. The badge dimmed. No new messages. The resident approached her slowly. You look like someone who just finished a war. It was not a war. What was it? A calibration. He let that settle. Are you leaving? Yes, he swallowed. And we just go back to normal. She looked around at the cardiac wing. At the nurses adjusting drips. At the nurses adjusting drips. At the steady monitor rhythms. The other shrugged. You adapt. He nodded slowly. That's worse. Yes, but embedded within the timing logs and equipment. Anomalies was enough pattern recognition for the right analysts to read. She removed the altered sensors from her locker, placed them into a sealed evidence pouch. The federal agent provided. At 3:42, dawn began to edged faintly against the skyline again. Second sunrise since the first blackout. The hospital lights seemed steadier now. The other shrugged. Not because they were stronger, because everyone had seen them fail. She stood at the window at the end of the corridor. Temporary badge still clipped in place. The resident joined her. One last time. You never told me your name, he said. She watched the city wake slowly. I did, she replied. No, he said gently. You gave me your assignment. A pause. She unclipped the badge, handed it to him. Keep watching, she said.